I'm Dr. Allin at Evolve Chiropractic here in Woodstock. Today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about stress. Now I'm sure that's something that nobody in this past year, it being now 2021, nobody can relate to this topic at all at this point in time, I'm sure. But nonetheless, let's talk a little bit about how stress can affect your health. Most people, when they think of stress, they're going to think of one type of stress primarily, which is the mental, emotional stress. But there are different types of stress which actually respond the exact same way chemically inside of our bodies than it is. So whether you're being chased by a bear or stuck behind somebody at a red light that turns green and now they're just sitting there looking at their phone, your body has the same exact response and it has the same exact impact on your health, especially if you're under a stressful mindset or a stressful environment in your body over a long period of time. And that's what we would call chronic stress. So typically when stress is chronic is where you start to notice disease states. So we're going to look at three types of stress. First type of stress we'll talk about is physical stress. So that's not the type of stress that most people think about. A way that we could look at that would be like, you get hurt. Obviously that's a stressor to your body. The second type of stress being mental, emotional stress. And again, that's what most people identify with, most people are comfortable with. It's being stressed out, being angry, being frustrated. Most of those things are normal occurrences throughout life and as we're living. But if we do these states of mind over and over again, and we're ruminating in these states, it can actually have a detrimental effect on our health. The last one we're going to talk about is biochemical stress, which that one's a little trickier. We have talked about anti-inflammatory diet. So if you haven't checked out my talk on that, you can find that on our Facebook page. But the thing about biochemical stress is it's not just diet, but it can be. So standard American diet is extremely inflammatory to our system. And our system has to combat that with certain hormones to reduce that stressful impact. So that being said, other types of stress that can be chemical would be like our environment. So different pollutants that we encounter throughout our day. So in our water supply, in our air supply. So certain stressors we're not really able to completely rid ourselves of. But if we're able to adapt to these stressors, then our lives will be healthier in the end. So let's look a little bit more specifically at each type. So physical stress being infections are a very important one. A lot of us are dealing with chronic low-grade infections, primarily in the gut. You may not think of it, but sometimes people get, like IBS or problems with digesting certain foods. They're gassy, they're bloated all the time, and they've just kind of seen that as normal. Or normal for them, like what? I go to the bathroom once every 4 days. Isn't that normal? No, that's not normal. That's a disease state. So something's going on with your digestive system where there's usually some type of low-grade infection, which we could call like SIBO, a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. That's one example, where your intestines are kind of like in this low-grade inflammatory disease state, and they need to be balanced out. So that's an example of a stressor. Surgery. I don't know if you guys have ever had surgery. I've had a few myself. Going through that process of a surgical intervention creates stress on the body. Just like if you're being chased by a bear, that same exact hormonal response happens when you go under the knife. Let alone now you have the whole recovery process of coming out of the surgical intervention and now rebuilding your way back to health or trying to heal from that intervention. So all of that is, again, the very similar stress response that we get inside of our bodies. Chronic pain. I see that every day in my office. People have been dealing with back pain for 10 years and they consider it to be a normal thing. Unfortunately, that low-grade pain has a detrimental effect on their overall health because they've been living in a low-grade state of inflammation for many years, and these hormones that are getting produced to counteract that stress is having a negative impact on different parts of their health. And then finally, injury, trauma, that's given. I mean, you chop your arm off, obviously that's going to be kind of stressful. So again, like we know that like the main stressors are common knowledge. We understand that. But it's those little ones like chronic pain, like the infections that we're kind of working with, like low-grade infections, low-grade inflammation that we're dealing with on a daily basis. They actually are going to add up, and over time they can lead to other disease states, as we're going to see in just a moment. But let's look at a different type of stress, one that we're more so familiar with. So say you're working in a job that you really don't like to work, and every day you get up, it's just you have to push yourself and get out of bed and go. That state of resistance, that state of friction internally creates a very similar response to when you chop off your arm. Crazy as it sounds, there's a similar chemical response that's happening inside of your body. Home. So if you are having trouble at home, you're going through a divorce, if you're a child and your parents are going through a divorce, or you're fighting with your significant other over certain things, that chronic repetitive stressor of home life imbalance has a very similar effect. Self-talk. So if you're talking to yourself negatively inside of your brain, you suck, you're not good at this, why are you even trying? If you have a repetitive, stressful internal dialogue like that, studies have shown that the same type of hormones are being released with these negative thought patterns. So mindset plays a huge role in overall health patterns, which kind of makes sense. Social aspects. Now I know recently we've all kind of been trapped up inside and haven't been able to interact with our peers in social environments or have positive social interactions. Again, looking at research and stress levels associated with the lack of social interaction, it's huge. Mortality rates are a lot higher in nursing homes where individuals have not had social interaction, positive social interaction with their family or friends. So we see these things as a negative impact on health, but I feel like we don't really give them enough credit. So let's move on to our biochemical. So we talked a little bit about that already, where diet can play a role in a low-grade inflammatory response that's going on in the body all the time. You look at the standard American diet, it's very high in carbohydrates, right? When we increase our load of carbohydrate foods, like sugars, like breads, pastas, white flours, things like that, it really messes with our blood sugar control. And what our body does is it releases these stress hormones to balance out that control of the blood sugar response. Unfortunately, what happens is it causes our blood sugar to spike even higher, throws off our ability to control that blood sugar response, and then we have other detrimental effects to our health over time. Not, let alone think about it this way, you're not getting the building blocks you need to actually heal your body as well, right? So I'll go on a rant on anti-inflammatory diet for hours, so I'm just going to keep on stress. I'm going to stop myself from jumping onto that bandwagon. Now look at medications that you're having. These can actually create stressors in the body. It's not healthy to take certain medications all the time, like ibuprofen, Tylenol. A lot of my patients will be coming into my office and they're taking these things daily, and they have been for months to years. And it's really starting to break down and create inflammation inside their system. Now again, the body will deal with that inflammation the same way it does with fighting with your spouse, chopping off your arm, getting chased by a bear. All these things have a very similar response to your hormonal system. Your hormones get released and certain things happen chemically in the body regardless of the stress. And environmental pollutants, again, this is one that's difficult to get away from because we can use filters like carbon filters on our water or our reverse osmosis systems where we can get some of that crap that's going into our water out of our system. We can use detoxification methods like infrared saunas, different things we can eat to increase our excretion of certain pollutants that we encounter in our environment. But the reality is it's around us all the time. We can do lots of things to try to reduce the load, but there's really no getting around environmental pollutants. So that's one stressor that we're really always encountering and we can't really do a whole lot about. There are certain things we can kind of mitigate our exposure or our response to it, but again, it's just always there. So to think about like what happens to our body when we enter stress, like it doesn't matter what the stressor is, the response is the exact same, especially when you look at it from a biochemical level. And what we call this is cortisol, and we'll talk about that in a second. But something to think about is how stressors can accumulate in the body. So say you had a terrible day at the office, you come home and you fight with your wife, you stub your toe as you walk into the door. You go drink half a bottle of Jack Daniels to kind of calm yourself down. All these things are stressors that you're encountering, and it's skyrocketing your adrenal glands to produce this cortisol and epinephrine and norepinephrine. So these stress hormones that have a physiological response in your body, and it just starts to build up. And a lot of patients will say like, yeah, I have stressors in my life, but I just deal with them. I'm not sick, I'm healthy. So yeah, maybe you don't have symptoms yet, but think of this term allostatic load. What that means is that things will slowly build up. It's kind of like a bucket that's under a faucet that's just slowly dripping into it, right? Over time, that bucket's just going to keep filling and filling and filling. And think of the end of that bucket as your symptom or your disease state. So each little stressor is a little drop in that bucket. And if it keeps flowing up faster than your body can handle those stressors, that's where you enter that disease state. Think about that. So cortisol, when we've looked in studies, is actually responsible for a lot of different disease states. So you're looking at obesity, trouble losing weight, thyroid problems. You're looking at imbalances in blood sugar, so that's like metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance. Heart disease is a huge one. Gut issues, so like IBS, right? So problems digesting foods. Immune problems, so people that get sick all the time. Inflammation, so that low grade chronic pain, like I didn't really do anything, but now my shoulder's hurting. I woke up with a crick in my neck, and that happens 3 times a month. So these types of like pains and problems that people get where there's really no direct injury, that's a sign that there's a low level of inflammation going on. And most likely it's due to levels of stress that are just kind of adding up in your body. Difficulty sleeping, difficulty with memory and cognitive function. So you're looking at correlations to Alzheimer's and dementia. All these things are related to release of one stress hormone, cortisol. And there are a few others that could also have detrimental effects on your body. So it's kind of crazy to think about that if we're not able to handle stress properly, and it keeps adding up, and we're having all these different symptoms, and now we're going to the doctor and we're getting these medications to take care of these symptoms, and these medications create other symptoms where we need to take other medications to help those symptoms. We're adding the toxic level in our body, we're adding to the stress, so that allostatic load is building up. And all that's going to happen in that state is you're just going to keep getting sicker and sicker and sicker, and your quality of life is going to keep dropping down. And you're not going to know why you're always tired. You're not going to know why you're always irritable. So what I'm trying to say right now is that the importance of mitigating and managing stress is more important than most people give credit to. So if we think about stress and the system inside of our body that handles stress, it's what's called the autonomic nervous system. So we're either in a state of fight or flight, right? So being chased by the bear, you're either going to fight the bear, good luck to you, or you're going to book it. So that's that state of, I got to do something. Now on the other side of that is our parasympathetic nervous system. And that's what we'll be calling our rest or digest system. So that's important for rest and recovery. When we're eating foods and we are relaxed, our digestive system will actually kick in. So things like the dilation of your pupils, Dryingness of the mouth, increasing your heart rate. So think of like being chased by a bear. What needs to happen in your body if you're being chased by a bear? Your pupils need to dilate. You need to see where you're going to be running to next, right? Your heart rate goes up so that all the blood starts pumping out, and you got to run to the nearest bush or hole in the ground. I don't know. How are you getting away from the bear? You're going to run up a tree? What's going to happen? Basically, you're stopping the digestive process because your body's not worried about your internal organs when you're trying to run from a bear. It's worried about pumping out to get you away. So there's all these different things, and releasing of glucose is a huge one. So stimulating the release of glucose will basically pump out all that fuel that you've been storing and dump it out into the cells, so into your bloodstream, so that your muscles can bring it in and use it and help you sprint. But if you don't have to sprint, if all you're doing is pumping your horn at the person in front of you, you have all this released glucose in your system. What happens to that if you don't use it? Usually gets stored as fat. Having trouble losing weight? Think about it that way. If you're always under this fight or flight state, and you're not using this excess energy that's getting dumped out, where's it going to go? So we can look at the parasympathetic nervous system as relaxation. The heartbeat slows, the pupils will constrict, right? So the stomach starts to move, the intestines start to move. All these things are responsible, done by the parasympathetic nervous system. If you look at sexual dysfunction, I know that's a taboo topic, but nonetheless, if you're always in a fight or flight state and you have trouble getting an erection, something to think about. If you look at the sympathetic nervous system, that ain't gonna happen when you're under a sympathetic nervous system state. All right? Something to think about. So think of it like a teeter-totter, right? So you're either in that sympathetic state or you're in that parasympathetic state. Now there are certain times where we can try to balance that out, and that's what we call homeostasis. So the body's always trying to balance out this system. But if we're constantly putting ourselves into situations where we're pushing that sympathetic nervous system, the body is responding chemically to that response. Now, not all stress is bad. One way to think about it, like if you go to the gym and you work out, there's a certain level where you're in your workout and you've done way too much and you hurt yourself, right? So excessive workout can be just as detrimental and stressful as, being chased by a bear all the time. It's that same hormonal response. Now what we got to think about is hormesis, which means that we can use certain stressors to mitigate that stress response and actually build a resilience to stress. So there's things like saunas, cold exposure, exercise. Now exercise, used appropriately, is a form of hormesis. We're creating damage to our muscle cells so that the muscles will actually grow bigger. And next time we apply a load to them, it'll be stronger and it'll be able to withstand that load. Fasting. Imagine going 24 hours without eating anything and just drinking water. What about 16 hours? Most people will eat 3, 4, 5 meals a day and never give their body a chance to slow things down and start to metabolize all the energy that it's stored and start to turn over cells that are damaged. So they found that techniques like intermittent fasting, there's a lot of different fasting techniques out there, but you can actually reach that hormesis level where you're getting a benefit to your health by removing offending things. Where if you were to fast forever, you would die, right? That would be a bad thing. But doing it in small bits and small increments, you're actually creating a positive effect on your health. That's hormesis. Alcohol, don't get too excited. This one, they have found benefits for males and females, but you're looking at about a 2 to 3 drink approximation there. Again, this could be something, if you drink way too much, has a huge negative effect on your health. And if you don't drink at all, it's not a problem. So the way I look at it, there are benefits to this one. It can be used for health, but don't get carried away now. All right. So what else can we do to affect our stress, that cortisol elevation? So if we look at the research, it's pretty clear cut. A big one is breathing and meditation. So taking time to slow down and enter that parasympathetic state, slowing down your breathing, slowing down your heart rate, not thinking of 25,000 other things you have to be doing in the next week. Slowing things down reduces that cortisol level. Even if you do it 5 minutes a day, it has a positive impact on your health. Crazy. 5 minutes of breathing. If you can't give yourself 5 minutes, what kind of life are you really living right now? Anti-inflammatory diet. So if we're eating things that create inflammation, the body is going to start to produce cortisol to combat that inflammation. You've heard of cortisone? That's what they inject in your knee to bring down inflammation. Now, cortisone is produced from cortisol. Crazy. So your body's like trying to bring down inflammation, but at the same time having all these other negative impacts on different organ systems. So reducing inflammation from your diet is probably one of the easiest ways. I say it's easy because we can actually control what we put in our mouths. So that's probably one of the easiest ways to do it. Not most enjoyable if you're addicted to certain foods, but easy nonetheless because I can't put that in my, nope, not going in my mouth. You can control that. Exercise. Again, controlled exercise, not working out for 3 hours a day at 100% max output. You're probably not going to have a benefit there. Now, 30 minutes a day has been shown to balance cortisol levels. So at, you could do HIIT, so high interval training, where basically you kind of sprint for a few seconds and then relax and then sprint. So there's different types of exercise, but condensed into about a 30-minute process. Even just getting out, walking, bringing up your heart rate a little bit will help to improve the balance of your cortisol levels. Chiropractic adjustments. Now, not just from a pain management perspective, but they've seen there's a biochemical response when you receive a chiropractic adjustment that it changes cortisol levels. It's kind of crazy. Massage therapy, been shown for the same thing. So more so in techniques like Swedish massage, where it's relaxing, increasing circulation. Those types of techniques have been shown in the literature to decrease cortisol levels as well. Psychotherapy and counseling. So talking to somebody about things, learning how to cope with stress, learning how to develop techniques and habits on, meditation, eating well. Like, why do I not want to take care of myself? These are people trained in how to help you figure these things out. Positive social interactions. It's probably a good idea to get out and meet with people. If right now the only place we can do that is on Zoom or whatever, then so be it. But nonetheless, we have to have social interaction, and it needs to be a positive one for us to have that benefit. So there's a lot of things we can do to fix and to cope and to manage that allostatic load. So even if we're able to take a little bit off the top, that's going to affect our body's crisis of dropping into disease state. So even if you're at disease state and you start to chisel away at your stress levels and your stress input to your body, things will improve. So we have a lot more control than we think. And the stress management has a lot more impact than we think on our health. So next time you think about, honking at that person that's in front of you, or picking up the Snickers bar instead of the piece of broccoli, that's a tough call there. I don't know. But think, be mindful, give yourself some time to slow things down, and things will get better. Your health will improve because your body's made to heal this way. So, some things to think about. Just don't stress out thinking about it. And we'll talk to you next time.